Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate Mogul MD. My name is Bob Bosick, and I'm a retired C-suite executive. I have the privilege of speaking with medical professionals and high-income earners and investors. We're here today to share the real-world journeys along with the to-dos and, more importantly, the not-to-dos. I'm excited to introduce everybody to Devin Miles. We've had the privilege of having her accept an invitation to speak with us today, and I just wanted to welcome you and say hello. How are you?
I'm good, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. Usually what I do is I start at kind of the beginning of your career, and that usually is just before that when we're in school. We're trying to decide what we want to do when we grow up. So why don't we start there? Where did you go to school, and what decisions did you make in terms of what you wanted to study so that you could begin your professional career?
Sure. So I always knew I was going to college. I didn't know what I was going to major in.
Yeah, like most of us.
And so my dad was in business, and he was like, well, why don't you just major in business? And from there, you can take a lot of different avenues. And I was just like, okay. And I went to Florida A&M University, which has a great business school. And that, I think, was a great move. I had looked at a lot of different schools, and that was the first one.
Did you grow up in Florida?
No, I grew up in Houston.
Oh, okay. In Houston. I used to live in the Woodlands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so familiar.
Yeah. So that was the first place I was like, oh, I can see myself here. And so that's where I ended up going. And it was a great move for me. I think maybe in my junior year, Goldman Sachs came down and talked to us about their new program for college graduates. And they talked about investment banking. That was the first time I heard about banking. And what I liked about that was essentially you got to know a lot about different parts of the bank. And so for whatever reason, that appealed to me. So once they came down, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to go for. So I ended up not going with them for my first job, but I did land a job on Wall Street in New York as my first job in investment banking.
How were those hours?
Terrible.
Yes, they were, weren't they?
Very terrible. I just recently had a conversation about that with someone who was like, yeah, you couldn't pay. That was not enough money. I'd have to be paid 7 figures. That's what he was telling me.
Yes.
To
millions.
work the amount of hours. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And when he said that, I was just like, you're right. They shortchanged us. But yeah, so prior to that, though, I started having digestive issues in my senior year of college, which kind of surprised me because I was not stressed my senior year. I had an internship the summer between junior and senior year. I had a job in hand, like I was set after that. So it just kind of hit me in the spring. And when I got to my job in investment banking, of course, that made it worse.
That compounded the problem for sure.
Right. And I just decided after a while, investment banking wasn't for me anyway. And it took me some time to I was still in the business. I ended up moving to an executive admin assistant job within private wealth management. So that was a unique space even in itself, to the private wealth management side of things, while also just being an assistant. I was able to kind of take a break, but I still had the pressure on me to try to self-teach myself how to become a financial advisor.
Yeah.
But in any case, through all of that time, I was trying to figure out how to help myself. And I was introduced to natural healing. And that, I had done all the previous stuff about going to a gastroenterologist, and I really wasn't getting much help, but I did get a diagnosis, which is irritable bowel syndrome. And when I went into the more natural space and got guidance from there, that's when I started seeing some results. And I read a book, and the book happened to, by the time I started reading this book, I was already thinking I might want to make a career out of this. And so when I read the book, and that was a book that I looked forward to reading, which was significant for me at the time because I didn't like reading outside of work and school. She was a naturopathic doctor. And when I read up about what that was, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And so I switched careers, moved from New York to Arizona, went to naturopathic medical school for 4 years.
And where in Arizona?
In Tempe. So not too far from ASU. It's not ASU. It's Sonoran University of.
So you were in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area.
Yes, yes, I
And
was.
so and then tell me about the 4-year journey. You went down that path. How was that for you?
That was another very rigorous environment. However, it wasn't the hardest thing I've done. Because I did banking first.
Yeah.
I was more prepared. It still wore me out, but it didn't. I
It
still
didn't have
got
the intensity of that banking experience on Wall Street.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is legendary, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was rough. I mean, people don't always realize naturopathic. There's different schools of schooling or education types for naturopathic medicine. I went the route of becoming a naturopathic physician. So there's about 8 accredited schools in North America. I went to the one in Arizona. It is full on naturopath. It's even though I'm saying naturopathic medical school, it's full on medical school. I mean, it's a lot. We have about the same amount of loans that we come out with as MDs, which is
you get $250,000 worth of loans when you exit.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
That's exciting, isn't it?
Yes. But yeah, and then you take the 2 board exams, you get the license to practice medicine.
And can you prescribe? You can prescribe pharmaceuticals.
Yes. So there are some differences. Like there's certain medications, like some of the class ones, we don't get into those. We're not doing like invasive surgeries, but we can do minor surgeries like removal of warts and skin tags. We use regenerative injection therapies like prolotherapy, PRP. And then we do all the basic foundational things that naturopathic doctors have always done since the early 1900s. And that's another thing people don't always realize. We've been around that long.
Oh, yeah.
And those things that we used back then, we still use now. And as time goes on, we continue to add to our therapeutic toolkit.
Is there specialties within there, within your schooling there? Like in medical school, you specialize in, I don't know, plastic surgery or internal medicine or anesthesiologist. Are there specialties as well?
People do choose what they want to focus on after school. They may focus on a specific therapy and then, address everything, or they may decide I'm going to use multiple therapies and I'm only going to focus on these specific conditions.
Which is your approach? What do you subscribe to?
I focus on kidney function, blood pressure, digestion, and prevention. And I use a wide variety of therapies to assist with that. It's a state-by-state decision whether or not naturopathic physicians practice medicine. So in the states that they don't, we're using more of the foundational things that we have been taught. That's not really considered medicine.
Give me an example of foundational.
Foundational would be diet, herbs, homeopathy, referrals, lifestyle changes, etc., which goes a long way.
You bet. Sure. And then in terms of treating blood pressure, not the way that you just described, how would you enhance that by way of example, using blood pressure as an example?
Yeah, so with blood pressure, there's different herbs that can be quite helpful to reduce the blood pressure. Of course, you got to look at the person's diet. I take when people come to see me, I see them for like an hour and a half for the first visit. Follow-ups are an hour. So the story of why somebody has blood pressure can be different, and that's also part of what I'm looking for. So even though
genetics, is it whatever, right? Or that's the way I look at it. Is it genetic or is it environmental, things of that nature? Trying to understand the cause, the root cause. Right.
So it could be all those things. It could be sleep apnea. It could be also part of it, right? Stress. People don't always realize how stressed they are, and so depending on what I think is priority, I may go for that thing first. So like, for instance, one guy, I don't think I gave him much for actual direct blood pressure herbs. I worked on his stress levels and his sleep because he was particularly not sleeping well. And when I did that, his blood pressure came down.
Terrific.
So, and he
what herbs, like what kind are we talking? People can go down to Whole Foods or someplace and get the herbs that you're describing?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no, just because they're not, Whole Foods just may not carry them.
Yeah.
People know about celery, for instance, celery seed. Other things that I may suggest is something like Rosa centrifolia. So that may just not, it just may not be in the
Yeah.
store.
How do they access those things? Where do they go to get your suggested herbs?
So they can access them through me. I have an online supplement dispensary that supplies a lot of things that I use. They can also probably find it online at various herb stores.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different outlets. I'd like my clients to work with me first, just to make sure that they know the effectiveness of what is
right.
The effectiveness to expect before they start trying to go other places to
go
get
places. So you have confidence in the efficacy of what you are providing, and then that gives them a baseline that if they deviate and go elsewhere, they know if they're getting the same results and or what they should be expecting.
Right, right. And of course in my line of work and how I operate as a naturopathic doctor virtually, I don't treat, I don't cure, I just help bring the body back in balance. So
right.
that is what I offer, and I've been able to help a lot of people doing.
And where are you located now?
I am in Houston. I see my clients virtually. So I've seen, what'd you say?
You went home.
I did for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see clients globally, based off of how I've chosen to operate. And yeah, so a lot of people are here, but I've also seen people nationally, internationally as well.
That's terrific. What was the biggest challenge you think you've faced, and what have you learned from that experience, starting from college to today? What's that biggest challenge that you've faced?
For me, being an ND, I'd say if I had to go back and do things over a little bit, I wasn't in the place to understand what I'm about to say, which is really understanding the dynamics of being an ND on the other side. MDs, they can get a job pretty much anywhere. They are within a system that supports them.
Right.
That's not necessarily the case for naturopathic doctors. That's why when you have a state that is supportive of the licensure, it makes a big difference, or a state that's okay with you kind of operating a certain way versus states like Florida and Tennessee, which outlaw naturopathic medicine.
Really? That's interesting.
Yes. There are entities actively licensing against us or trying, things like that.
They're lobbying against you. And it probably has a lot to do with the traditional medical industry that would be, and pharmaceutical companies, things of that nature that would be not very interested in what you're doing.
Yeah. So I would say it made me realize, there are jobs that naturopathic clinics will offer to new coming naturopathic doctors that graduated, but a lot of us end up being entrepreneurs. And that is the route that I took. I'd never done anything like this before. So that was hard. That was very, and it's still something that I continue to learn. I'm just in a better place than I was when I started, but it was just like, there was no structure. I just, that was what was hard.
You learn the hard way too.
And then just, it wasn't like I was just selling hot dogs, I had more to work at with all those different dynamics, entrepreneurship and just making sure I'm doing things the best that I can.
Well, I think you're entering into your area of focus at an interesting time in our culture in the United States. I believe people are becoming very much more self-aware of what they're consuming. I'll use the word cleanliness of it, but lacking other inputs into their food. People are more aware of non-traditional medicine, be it chiropractic or acupuncture or whatever it is, right? And I think that you have positioned yourself well. This is the stuff we're talking about 20 years ago was taboo. I remember my father in the 70s went to medical school, and he was a real outlier, right? I got in a car accident as a teenager in the late 70s, and And he set me straight to get acupuncture, chiropractic work, was very much receptive to non-traditional medicine, but he was clearly an outlier. And quite candidly, society kind of, looked at it as quackery back then. And it is completely different environment, in my opinion, in what I consume today than what I experienced as a young person with my father, who was, went to traditional medical school and, practiced medicine, and that, and so I just think it's an interesting time. And I think people are receptive in society to looking for alternative medicines. I think people are very much more aware of the impact of pharmaceuticals and their agenda, and why am I taking this medicine, and are there alternatives to do things? So it's very interesting, and it's certainly, you can tell with me, I'm always interested in this type of discussion. How many graduates are coming out of the schools on a yearly basis, you think, or how big was your graduating class?
I think we had about 100 or so in your
class.
Yeah. So it's a smaller amount. I mean, it's definitely not like in the thousands.
That's good for you.
Yeah.
Right. Less people running around. Because I do believe, I think we are on the cusp in our society to just looking at this as the first alternative. Not saying to just do away with traditional medicine, of course, right?
No,
there's an absolute need, but let's make sure that, we don't head to surgery before we've exhausted everything else. Let's make sure that there's not natural resources available before I put myself on medicine. And I think there's a huge shift in societal views, and it's just my opinion, but I think it's a pretty well-informed opinion, actually, from reading and seeing, and, maybe your experience being on the ground is different, but do you agree with me?
I think, when I came back to Houston, I knew what I needed. I knew where to go find it.
Yeah.
Austin's well primed for, that environment. Naturopathic doctors are more well known. People seek them out more. It's a different type of culture in Austin. Houston.
That's a great point. Yeah. I don't mean to disparage a particular location, but if we were in Butte, Montana, they might, or, somewhere in West Virginia, they might have a different viewpoint. Right. But you get around college towns, even in a place like Mississippi, you go, oh, Mississippi might be like that also. But I bet if you went to Oxford, Mississippi, there might be a different viewpoint, much like in Austin, Texas, right? Where there's, young and they're educated and they have a different viewpoint.
Yeah. And I would say since I've been back in Houston, which was since 2016, when I first started, if I said the word naturopathic, they were like, what? Can you say that again? And now I say it, they're like, oh, okay, great. Yeah. So I see that things have been moving in a good direction in that way. Naturopathic, that term is known beyond the United States. It's just a different type of schooling, but just to give even more insight to the people here in the United States, a lot of what we do is known other places, right?
Oh, sure.
Different types of therapy.
Go to China or Asia, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And acupuncture is one of the things that we learn in naturopathic school. And so sometimes I will bring that traditional Chinese medicine knowledge I have into what I'm thinking about for my clients. And sometimes I will refer them to an acupuncturist if I think that's a really good route for them to go. So
I was just in San Francisco this week, and you're making me think of, my walks through Chinatown in San Francisco. And just jars and jars of, herbs and different, things that are available to you. So yes, it's, we could talk about this for hours. So what would you describe at this point? I know you're bootstrapping up and getting your business started, and you're learning lessons. And I get all of that as a former executive. I've been on all ends of it. What would you describe as your greatest achievement? And what have you learned from it?
Well, I've been in business since 2016. that first 4 years was a struggle, and I started looking around for a business coach, and I finally found one that I really gelled with and really helped me to thrive. I think things got better then. I like one of the things that I enjoy about what I do is when I get into that creative space with it, and I get surprised sometimes when I write or I give speaking engagements and things come out that I didn't know were about to come out. I'm like, oh, that was good.
Give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I just came up with something. I connected something. I created some sort of new concept.
Yeah.
I like that. But at the end of the day, what I really enjoy is when I get my clients better every single time. I just
makes you feel good.
It's like, this is what I came into all of this to do.
Yeah.
Came in here to prevent and reverse illness. Like, there's so many things nobody needs to be dealing with, particularly with kidney function. That's a whole other conversation about why I'm an advocate for trying to get the word out about that, because a lot of people don't understand. They're not aware as much as they should be when they're at risk for that.
Kidney issues. It's an insidious problem that I was recruited once to be a senior executive for a very large company called Devita. And Devita, they're dealing with people that have kidney failure, and it's just insidious what they're experiencing. It really is. I have a little bit of contact with that, but how do you handle and tackle that early on?
So at first, like, I'm kind of going through lessons of entrepreneurship. Yeah. I first started marketing myself for kidney function. Hardly got anybody in the door.
Yeah.
Then I started going into digestion because that's what I knew, right? That was really what I knew, like, more because of my personal experience. And then I realized what I needed to do was go to the risk factors of kidney function and market to them, which was there's a lot of different ways you can take that. But for me, it was high blood pressure, chronically high blood sugar. Those people did not really get what they were up against if they weren't fully in control of their blood pressure and their blood sugar. And I had a lot of people coming to me in those few years when I was only marketing for kidney function. It was the same story over and over. They didn't find out until later stages that their kidneys were damaged. And I was like, that's disturbing.
Yeah, right.
And so that's why I try to reach those who have risk factors and tell them then. And I'm like, hey, not only can I help with your risk factors, but also let's look at your kidneys. Let's see where they are right now. I'm going to help you to understand what you need to look at, and, also talking to your doctor about them. And you can work with me to protect your kidney function, to stabilize your kidney function, to improve your kidney function, as well as, any whatever else you might be dealing with that caused this in the first place, because that matters in terms of helping to preserve the kidney function as well.
Very good. So, you've been out for about 6 years. Is that correct?
Yep.
7 years.
6.5. Yeah, something. Yeah.
So, what from taking on for your financial future, how have you thought about the future for yourself, creating wealth? But in the immediacy, we've got this student debt we have to handle, and we want to tackle that and get those interest rates and all of that stuff handled. So what are you doing to work on that? What are ways you're trying to take control of your financial future?
So in the beginning, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is a lot, because again, going back to the dynamics of being an ND, to even start to chip away at the principal beyond paying the interest, you had to pay out like $1,200 something a month. That was not sustainable after a while. Right. And then they put the hold on the loans. And so what I decided to do is still put a much smaller portion towards them every month so that I can chip away at this time while they are still on hold. Yep. Also, I am moving into a space where I am going beyond fee for service, even though I love working with people one-on-one and I want to keep doing that. That's that's one way that I learn a lot when I'm working one-on-one. But at the same time, I have to go beyond that to build the wealth that I want to build. And so looking more into classes and products that, for those who are wanting to follow me, I encourage you to do so, because I will eventually start to talk about that. That will be in the future, to just continue to build in that way. I'm also
gotten involved. Have you been able to get yourself involved in maybe acquiring any real estate or doing syndications, anything along those lines?
So real estate is not just yet, but it is one of those things I kind of have in the back of my mind. And I am interested in international travel. And so as I look around internationally, I may be starting to buy international real estate if it seems like a good idea, depending on the country.
Very good.
But yeah, also here. I mean, even though I'm from Houston, I am originally from New Orleans, and so I've also kind of entertained that idea.
Is it New Orleans or is it Nolans?
New Orleans. New Orleans. People say it different ways, like New Orleans or New Orleans, but most people just say New Orleans. Yeah.
Did you transition from there during Katrina to Houston?
No. We came when I was very young.
Very young.
School, yeah. But we go back and forth all the time because we have family there.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that I've thought about in the background that may happen later.
And where would you first be traveling to and entertaining? As you sit there and fantasize or romanticize a place where you'd like to go internationally, is it in the Americas, or is it to Europe or Asia? Where would you go?
I right now am thinking more about Africa, Middle East, Asia, Caribbean, America. I want to bounce around a little bit and see all of them, and that'll help me to over time make a decision about where I really want to have more of a plan, if you will.
Very good. Who's someone that the listeners may not know, but they should know? Somebody that's really resonated with you on your journeys, because you have an interesting journey from Wall Street to school for medicine, a natural approach. You've covered the gamut here a little bit. Is there someone that the listeners may not know, but maybe they should?
I mean, I really like my business coach. So she's also a naturopathic doctor doing amazing things. So Dr. Jaquel Patterson.
Where do they find her?
She has a clinic called Fairfield Family Health. If you also just look up Dr. Jaquel Patterson, she's all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just say one of the things that people pondered about me when I made this switch from finance to naturopathic medicine, like, how did you do that? That's a completely different language. And for me, I think it's like, if you're, when you like something, when you're wired for it, it's easier. I mean, this was, even though it was a lot, it's still easier than.
Yeah, the grind isn't as much of a grind when it's something that is really fascinating and interesting to you.
Well, even as I'm learning, like the concepts just, they sunk in a whole lot better than the things that, I was learning in finance. And so just realizing that even if it's a completely different field, it doesn't mean you won't excel even better just because you might be more wired for that thing.
And where can our listeners find you? If somebody wants to reach out to you for some guidance, some assistance with issues that they're having, how do they locate you?
So two ways. My website, which is drdevinmiles.com. Devin is spelled with an I. You can also find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at drdevinmiles.
Okay. And Devin is Devin, Miles, Miles.
Correct.
Terrific. Well, this has been an interesting discussion, one that you can tell that I'm interested in, and I was excited to have you on, and that proved to be a good idea. I very much appreciate you sharing your journey and your lessons learned, and it's been a terrific time talking with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the time.